And the best way to do that is to make sure that you have feedback that goes, an environment of feedback is what I'd like to say, where you should be able to give feedback to the employees, and employees can also give feedback to you. But it really depends on the leader, whether he'll make the employees feel comfortable giving feedback. So some things about feedback. The first thing is never label or use comparative language. So when you give feedback to employees, just talk about that employee's performance. Do not try to compare him to other people in the team. Remember, each person is unique. That's why the 4 dimensions of a whole person, you need to understand that for each of your employees. So never compare, because situations will never be the same between employees. Yeah, they may be doing the same job, but each of them may be experiencing different challenges, right? The other thing is don't label, because when you say, oh, you tend to be lazy, then it becomes a mindset, which is a loose win, right? And if you always have that mindset that this person is lazy, it's not going to help you overcome. In other words, rather than labeling people, try to focus on specific situations and keep that win-win mindset. So some of the feedback do's, it really starts with, as a leader, knowing what's going on, okay? It starts with a win-win mindset, and then where your intention for giving feedback should always be because you want the person to get better. I always say feedback is a gift. If it's positive feedback, then it's reinforcement, telling the person that, hey, you know what? You're doing great. Yeah, and keep it up. Whatever you're doing, it's working. The other thing is, when it's constructive feedback, it still is a gift, because it gives the other person an opportunity to do something about it before the problem gets any worse, right? And correct it. The thing is, unless we call it out, the person might not even know he's doing something wrong, right? So to give proper feedback, the first thing you have to do is you have to identify the issue. What's the issue, especially for constructive feedback? I think people don't have a problem giving positive feedback, okay? But the thing is also, if you just give positive feedback, that's what you call positive toxicity, right? Oh yeah, just talks about the good stuff, but not what's really happening. So you have to be able to balance that, right? So it starts with describe your concern. What is the problem, okay? You've been coming in late, for example. But don't just say, I heard, or somebody saw you. When you describe a concern, make sure you yourself was the one who observed the specific concern. It's either you saw it happening, okay, you actually observed it, or you have the data to back it up. The worst thing that you can do when you give feedback is, I heard, or someone told me, or this is the impression I get. No, it has to be based on facts. Make sure when you give feedback, you describe a concern, you share a specific observation, and then give an example. So don't just say you're always late or you never are online. You can say, on Monday and on Tuesday, I noticed that you got into the system online, into the system 1 hour late. And because of that, you then describe the impact. So what? If you came in late, what's the impact? Because of that, we had some client calls that had to be diverted to your teammate. And they had to handle that in addition to their regular load. So when you want to give real good feedback, as I mentioned, it has to be your own very, very specific description of the concern, your observation, and it's backed up by real information. And then you give that example. When you give feedback, it's important that you also do this emphatically. What do we mean by emphatically, okay? It's emphatic listening is really about not just listening to the employee so that you can respond. But you listen and try to understand from the employee's point of view. And this is where your compassion, your consideration will show, right? So it starts with preparing really for your feedback session. Don't just call in an employee and then say, I've noticed these things, and without having prepared. You want to make sure you prepare. How do you prepare? Understand the issue, as I said, and the impacts, all right, of the feedback that you want to give. And then aside from that, anticipate responses. Do not just come in and expect the employee to accept everything that you've told him. Oh, but I have all the data. Try to anticipate what the employee will tell you so you can be better prepared with some answers as well. And then, while you're doing this, create a win-win agreement with the employee so that he sees feedback as not just your way of dumping everything on him, but because you really want to, the intention is really to get him back on track, okay, for whatever the situation is. So listening emphatically is very important, not just when you're giving feedback, but actually for every conversation that you might have.